Welcome to the Lesson 1 training video for CARE. Before we get started with an overview of what you're going to be doing in that first lesson, I just want to remind everybody that if you need any materials at all, you can go to our website, which is www.stoppingstressinschool.com. Click here on the CARE homepage, and it will take you to this page, or the CARE icon, and it will take you to this page, which has all of the information, all of the PDFs, the workbooks, the teacher manuals, PowerPoints, anything you might need to implement CARE you can find here. So we are going to get started. I just want to point out here for this first lesson that we do have at the very beginning of each lesson in the teacher manual, we have a box here with some information for you to help you prepare for the lesson. It has a short lesson overview. We have the student objectives, which you can find in the student workbook. You can find a spot here that talks about the materials that are required that you need. And then there's also the optional materials. Optional materials are going to be the things that you might need if you wanted to do some of the supplemental activities. Materials is what you want to focus on. These are the things you absolutely need. So for the first lesson, you need student workbook. So each student needs their own copy because they are going to be writing in it. And then you're also going to need that self-monitoring worksheet, which you can find in Appendix A of the teacher manual of this document. Self-monitoring worksheet looks like this. So you are going to need one of these for each student. So you're going to want to make sure you've printed those off as well. So now that we've gone over that, we are going to get started. Quick reminder too, if you are doing this as part of a research project, please make sure you are filling out these treatment fidelity checklists. This is lesson 1 checklist. Make sure that you are filling this out as you teach the lesson so that we can keep track of the different components. Okay, so I'm going to go through the first lesson using the PowerPoint. So the lesson goals for students, we're going to learn about the CARE program. We will create ground rules for our class, and we will learn how to self-monitor situations at school. So this is the first page. Here for students, our welcome page. It is page 3 of the student workbook. And this just provides students with some background information on what CARE is. So go ahead and read through this with students or have students take turns reading this part aloud. This is also on page 3. This here is Momo. Momo is going to be the cartoon character that we're going to use throughout the book to help illustrate some different situations and tools. Momo is also having some trouble controlling his emotions at school, and so he's going to do some modeling for students throughout the CARE program and throughout the student workbook. And then finally, at the bottom of page 3 of the student workbook, we've got just a little roadmap for students for what we're going to be doing. You can tell them we're going to go over what the program looks like. We're going to make group rules for us to follow. They're going to pick a problem at school that they want to get better at, and then they're going to play a game as a class. So, the CARE lessons. This is page 4 of the workbook. We wanted to give students just a brief overview of what that looks like. So you can tell them the first thing, we're going to review what we've already learned. There's going to be a review portion there at the very beginning when students come in. Next, they're going to actually do the lesson, which is going to involve some reading and some question answering. Sometimes there might even be an activity. If you have students who don't like reading, you might want to just remind them that don't worry, you don't have to read things on your own. The teacher is going to be there to read things, anything they might need help with. Number 3 is that at the end of each lesson, they're going to set a goal to practice the skills from that lesson. This is going to start in lesson 3. So the goal setting actually starts in lesson 3. Lesson 2 teaches us about goals and how we're going to do goal setting. And then lesson 3 is when they're actually going to start that goal setting process. But it's coming. And then the final part of each lesson is going to be the homework. And so you can prep students with that and kind of explain how that's going to work for them. I know in here it says the homework will only take you about 10 minutes to complete. In all likelihood, it's 5 or less. It would be 10 minutes tops. Okay, so this is the next page. This is page 5 of the student workbook. This is when we're going to do the come up with ground rules. So anytime we have a vocabulary word that we feel students might be unfamiliar with throughout the student workbook, we do go ahead and provide a definition here. So you can read that to students and then kind of read through why we're doing this. Really emphasize that we want to make sure everyone feels safe sharing thoughts and feelings, because we're going to be sharing our thoughts and feelings in this program. We want to make sure students feel safe doing so. So we're going to establish those ground rules. Have students help brainstorm what rules would be the best to use. Research has shown that when students have input in coming up with the rules, that they're going to be more likely to follow those rules. So have them brainstorm what rules they think would be important to follow during this program. So some common ones that students have come up with in the past have been to not interrupt each other, to only use kind words, to not criticize each other. Those are all things that students have brainstormed in the past. You want to come up with a minimum of 3 rules and no more than 5. And then go ahead and have students sign right here in their workbook, committing that they're going to follow those rules. And then the nice thing is, if students struggle at any point during the CARE lessons with following these, you can flip back to this page and review them as a class and kind of remind students, hey, this is what we decided that we were going to do at the very beginning. We need to be following these rules. So that is the ground rules activity. Okay, next. This is the next page of the student workbook, and this really kind of has students think about, well, how can CARE help me? Because that's what a lot of students want to know. So why am I doing this and how can this help me? So this is where you can emphasize to students that the goal of CARE is to help them handle their emotions and feelings at school in a positive way. And so have students really try and think about a situation at school where they want to or need to get better at handling their emotions and feelings. So this is often going to be a situation that might make them angry, that might make them sad, or might make them worried. So we've got some examples of situations here. So when someone says something mean to you, when you have to do a subject at school you don't like. So like some students really struggle during classes like math or reading, and so maybe that's a time where students don't handle their emotions and feelings very well. When they're given directions by teachers, when they get a bad grade. Just some examples there, definitely not limited to that. But really have students brainstorm a situation at school where they think, you know, I need to get better at handling my emotions there. So just some background for you on helping students pick a situation. So we want students to pick a situation that happens either every day or almost every day. So for example, a lot of students might say, well, I get really worried and I don't do well when I have to take tests. And that is a good situation to focus on, but unless that student is taking a test every single day, maybe pick a situation that really happens more on a daily basis. So maybe it's completing an assignment for a certain class, or an activity that happens in a certain class might be a better choice if that's applicable to that student. It should also be a situation that significantly impacts the student's ability to participate appropriately in school activities. We really want to help students identify that situation that other teachers and staff may have noticed and said, hey, we really need to work on so-and-so's ability to handle this situation. If a student does have a behavioral IEP goal, You might want to suggest or use this as the student situation. And then, well, we definitely want student input into picking their situation because they're going to be self-monitoring the situation every day. You really want to make sure that you're helping them pick a situation that's appropriate. So go ahead and have them brainstorm situations here. Once they think they've chosen a situation, make sure they check in with you. But you have ultimate approval over what situation that you think, over if the situation that they've chosen is appropriate or not. And so once students have all picked their situation, you can introduce the concept of self-monitoring. So this is at the bottom of that page in the student workbook. So when students self-monitor a situation, they're keeping track of how they're doing, what they're doing, and how they're feeling. And so you can tell students that the reason that we do this is if we're self-monitoring our behavior and emotions, and we're watching ourselves get better at handling our emotions and reacting in an appropriate way, it's going to make us feel really good inside. And if we're not improving, we can figure out what we need to do differently so we can get better. So you can then explain to them, this is the next page of the student workbook, that we are going to be self-monitoring that situation that they picked, and we're going to be using this scale to do so. And so you can explain how the scale works. If they were rating themselves on how well they're handling their identified situation, a 0 would be, I can handle that situation without any problems. So we're going to say that students probably aren't starting off at a 0 if they're picking the situation they need the most help with. An 8 is going to be, I need a lot of work on handling this situation. I don't handle this situation well at all. And then a 4 or 5 would be, I need some work on this situation. I can handle it okay, or maybe they handle it okay sometimes, but not every day. And so you can kind of walk through work through this scale with students, and make sure that they understand how that ranking system works. If you feel students need more practice with it, you might give them some examples, but this is the scale that they're going to use. And then at the bottom of the page, and this is page 7 of the student workbook, you're going to see that there's this example of the self-monitoring form. And this might be a really good time to go ahead and hand out the self-monitoring form and kind of walk students through it. So you're going to tell them, we're going to actually be self-monitoring that situation that you've chosen every day, and we're actually going to graph our different ratings so that we can see our progress. So I said at this point, go ahead and hand out that self-monitoring worksheet. It's going to look like this. And so you're going to want to have students put their name at the top, and then go ahead and have them put the month, the current month, and then write down their situation right here. And you can see we've included the rating scale here so that students have a reference. And then we're going to have them self-monitor. So, for example, if a student has a situation where they are not able to, they're really struggling in math class, let's say. They get frustrated and act out in math, and that's the situation that they picked. You're going to have them write that there, and then you're going to have them monitor or self-rate themselves. So maybe they start off at a 6 or a 7, and they're going to go ahead and color in this first bar right here where it says day 1. They're going to color it into 7. So that's where they're starting. And then it's really important to note to students that, you know, they're going to start up here at the top, and that's okay. You know, we want them to be honest with how well they're actually doing in that situation. So they are probably going to start up here at the top, and that's okay because they picked the situation that they need the most work on. And, you know, we're starting up here. And you might tell students, it's okay if you're up here, you're rating yourself pretty high on the scale, that you still need a lot of work on that situation. because, like I said, you picked the situation you probably need the most work on. And it might take you a long time to get better at it, and that's okay. But you can tell them that over time, because remember, we're going to be doing this program for 13 weeks. If they're using the strategies and the tools from that situation, we should be able to see that go down. Just a couple other things about the self-monitoring chart, just for you to know as the teacher. Notice that at the top here, we just have these labeled day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, just so you can help students identify what day they should be filling in on a certain day. Doesn't necessarily correspond to a certain calendar day. It's just the first or second or third day that you're doing this. But you can have students come in and tell them, hey, we're self-monitoring on day 3 today, and then they know that's what they're doing. If students miss a day, they can just skip it. It's not a big deal if they're absent or sick or for whatever reason they don't get to self-monitor. But it is really important to try and have students self-monitor every single school day. Having students graph their progress and reflect on their progress really increases the effectiveness of the program. That's why we have it set up here. And have included it in the care lessons. And then the last thing just to note for you as the teacher about the self-monitoring chart, again, notice there's only 31 days. Obviously, you're going to be doing the care program for more than 31 days. When students fill up that last column here in the graph, you're just going to get a new self-monitoring chart, print a new one out, and then just have them, put their name, the month, the situation again, and have them start back here at day 1. And if you want to look at long-term progress, you can set out, if you have 2 or 3 sheets going, you can put them out in a row and students can still see their progress. But unfortunately, we couldn't put that all on one sheet of paper. So we're going to have to do it on multiple sheets. Final thing here to note about the self-monitoring chart, if a student, let's say on week 8, is just doing awesome with their situation, they're consistently rating themselves down here at 1s and 2s and 3s, and they're doing really well with their situation, and they want to choose a new situation to work on because they feel like they've mastered that situation that they've chosen, their original one, they can choose situations, choose a new situation and start self-monitoring a different situation. That is definitely okay. Okay. So anyway, after students fill that out, and again, just as a reminder, we really recommend that you try and find a time of day, whether it's right before lunch, at the end of the day, where students are consistently filling this out every day. It just helps with the process, helps make sure that we're not missing days, and once students get started using it, they pick up on how to do it pretty quick. It doesn't take too long. Okay, and then the last thing to do is just briefly go over the homework for lesson 1. Make sure students have that. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. They're going to write down their classes here, so math, reading, PE, art, whatever classes they have. They're going to write those down here. And then over here, they're going to write how that class makes me feel. So PE makes me feel happy. Reading makes me feel bored. You tell students there's no right or wrong answer. They don't have to like all their classes. This is where they're being honest about this is how this class makes me feel. So remind students to do that. Make sure you're sending home parent letters at the end of lesson 1, so parents know what's going on in that first lesson. And that is it.